The news van pulls into the only open parking spot left on the town square. When the sliding door on the side opens, it splits the letters of the TV station in half. WCKD becomes WC.
That's what they call bathrooms in Europe, I hear.
A short, older gentleman says as he steps off the sidewalk and approaches the news van.
I'm sorry?
A tall woman in her late 30s replies from just inside the van. She leans out, her hands on the doorframe, her back hunched over.
Mayor Gantry?
That's me,
the older gentleman says with a broad smile.
Miss Alighieri?
A pleasure to meet you,
Dana Alighieri says, offering her hand from the van.
Call me Dana.
Let me help you out,
Mayor Gantry says. He takes Dana's hand, shakes it briefly, then helps the woman out of the van and onto the asphalt.
Thank you,
Dana says, then straightens up and looks around. She nods with appreciation at the quaint little town she finds herself in.
Lovely, just lovely.
Then she turns and looks down at the mayor, being a good 4 inches taller than him.
What was that you were saying about Europe?
Oh, the WC,
Mayor Gantry says, and points at the side of the van where the WC is prominently displayed.
Water closet. That's what they call bathrooms in Europe, I hear. Never been myself. Too much work around Kohlsville. Gotta keep the fires burning, if you know what I mean.
You'd be surprised how well I do know what you mean,
Dana says. She turns back to the van and leans her head in.
Bring the rig quick, Locke. I want you to do a brief run-through of the town's features, then try to get some color interviews before the festivities start.
Oh, the festivities started yesterday,
Mayor Gantry says.
I hope that isn't a problem.
Yesterday?
Dana asks, returning her attention to the mayor.
I thought they began on the 30th.
Yes,
Mayor Gantry responds, puzzled.
And today is the 31st. Halloween.
Is it now?
Dana says. She eases past the mayor and raps her knuckles on the driver's window. It slowly rolls down, and a scrunch-faced man with huge mutton chop sideburns leans out.
What?
He says with a snarl.
We're a day late, Virgil,
she says calmly as if nothing was amiss.
Traffic,
Virgil says, then leans back into the van and rolls the window back up. Dana turns and grins at the mayor.
Traffic,
she says with a shrug. The mayor smiles, but it's a very confused smile.
Well, there is still plenty happening today and tonight,
Mayor Gantry says.
And tomorrow as well, right?
Dana asks, her head swiveling back and forth as she returns to observing the town square.
Oh, of course,
Mayor Gantry responds.
But most only stay for Halloween.
The town does still celebrate Hallowmas, though, yes?
Dana asks.
That is kind of why we're here, to get a look at the lesser-known aspect of the season.
Hallowmas is mostly for locals,
Mayor Gantry says.
A visitor or two will be around during the day, but by evening, it is just us Kohlsvilleites.
Just you Kohlsvilleites,
Dana echoes as she rubs her hands together.
Well, this year you'll have a Dana Alighieri and her crew to document it for you.
Yes, about that part,
Mayor Gantry begins to say, but is cut off by a blood-curdling scream from the gazebo set in the middle of the perfectly trimmed grass in the center of the square. Dana snaps her fingers, and a short, squat man with a handlebar mustache hops out of the van with a camera rig on his shoulder. He races off to the gazebo without a word from Dana.
Gotta get that footage,
Dana says.
It's just Carly setting up the PA system,
Mayor Gantry says, laughing.
Perfect,
Dana says.
Now, where can a girl get a steaming cup of black coffee and freshen up?
That'd be Millie's for the coffee,
Mayor Gantry says.
Or if you'd prefer to freshen up first, I can show you to the Phoenix Inn. Mrs. Holstetter is thrilled to have a celebrity such as you stay at her little spot.
A celebrity?
Dana laughs.
I didn't know Kohlsville would get WCKD all the way up here in the north.
The mayor fidgets and his smile weakens.
That's all right,
Dana says, letting the mayor off the hook.
We're a local station with a lot of reach, but we aren't everywhere.
Well, we're just honored that someone wants to take notice of us,
Mayor Gantry says.
You get tourists, though, right?
Dana asks.
Lambs for the slaughter?
The mayor looks taken aback. Then he laughs again and gives Dana a big smile.
I get what you're saying.
Mayor Gantry says.
Without the tourists, we wouldn't be able to fund our little festival.
In more ways than one, I suppose.
Dana says, then claps her hands together.
I say coffee first, then freshen up.
Well, all right then. You'll follow me. I'll show you the way to the best coffee in New England.
He leans in conspiratorially as he and Dana move onto the sidewalk.
I have my own booth in the corner, reserved for the mayor.
Oh, how delightful.
Dana says.
I get to have breakfast with a local VIP.
One of the perks of the job,
Mayor Gantry says.
Can't wait to hear about the other perks.
Dana says.
Other perks?
Mayor Gantry asks.
You said the booth was one of the perks.
Dana responds.
I can't wait to hear what the others are.
Oh, I see. Yes.
Mayor Gantry says.
Unfortunately, the rest of the perks are not as exciting as having a corner booth at Millie's.
Come now, Mayor.
Dana says.
An important man like you must be granted a few luxuries here and there to help ease the burden of responsibility placed upon you. I think we all know how small towns like this run.
I'm not sure I like the implications, Miss Alighieri.
Mayor Gantry replies, his voice a bit chilly.
Now, Mayor, call me Dana, I insist.
Yes, well, Dana.
Mayor Gantry says.
The town of Kohlsville is on the up and up. No municipal shenanigans afoot here. We do things by the book. And if the book doesn't have the answer, then we always err on the fair and square side.
Err on the fair and square side,
Dana says.
That could be a nice title. I'll have to workshop it a bit, but I see potential.
Glad I could help,
Mayor Gantry says.
Just allowing me and my crew a behind-the-scenes peek into Kohlsville annual festivities is help enough,
Dana says. They stop in front of a small cafe. A bright red and white awning hangs over the front door with the words, Millie's Place, in old-time cursive written across it.
Let me show you to the, VIP section, Miss Alighieri.
Mayor Gantry says as he opens the door and gestures for Dana to enter the cafe.
After you, of course.
Such a gentleman,
Dana says. She enters the cafe and looks about as Mayor Gantry squeezes in behind her so the door doesn't bump him on the ass.
Lovely, just lovely,
Dana says. She points to the booth in the back corner.
Is that yours, Mayor?
It is,
Mayor Gantry says, and eases around the taller woman.
I'll show you the way.
The mayor makes a direct beeline for the booth, his head nodding at the townsfolk who are busy eating their breakfasts. Everyone smiles and nods back at the mayor. Then their eyes turn to Dana. Dana takes her time and studies the faces that look at her. The wattage of her grin amps up considerably, and she makes a point of angling her path so her hip touches each table as she passes.
Hello. Hi. Hello there. Good morning,
she says to the tables as she slowly makes her way to the mayor's booth.
I'll introduce you to some folks after breakfast,
Mayor Gantry says. He makes another gentlemanly gesture, this time toward the bench with its back to the door.
Please, have a seat, Miss Alighieri.
If you don't start calling me Dana, I'll begin to think you're insulting me on purpose, Mayor,
Dana says. The mayor looks shocked and places a hand to his chest.
I am so sorry. That is not my intention.
Mayor Gantry says.
I was just brought up to be polite that way. But it appears I've been a little over-polite. Dana, it is.
Thank you,
Dana says, and takes a seat so she is facing the whole cafe. Mayor Gantry looks a little frazzled. He glances down at the bench seat he'd indicated for Dana to take, then looks over at the bench seat she actually took.
Are you all right, Mayor?
Dana asks.
I usually face the door,
Mayor Gantry says.
so I can see who comes and goes and give everyone a friendly wave.
That's wonderful of you.
Dana says and picks up a menu.
What to have, what to have.
Yes, well, it's sort of tradition here in Millie's.
Mayor Gantry continues.
The mayor faces the door and greets folks as they come and go.
Yes, you said that.
Dana says and sets the menu down.
I am going to have the full harvest and a whole pot of coffee. I am starving.
Right, a fine choice.
Mayor Gantry says.
But that is quite a large breakfast. Mostly only the miners order it.
The miners? I thought the mine was closed.
Dana says. She cranes her neck so she can look past the still standing mayor.
Now, where's a waitress? If I don't get my coffee soon, I'll turn into a monster.
Yes, true. The mine is closed,
Mayor Gantry says.
but there are a few men who are still working there to help make sure the shafts don't go to ruin.
That's what Viagra is for.
Dana says and laughs. When the mayor frowns at her, she shakes her head.
So sorry, Mayor. I just couldn't help it. Please, continue. I want to hear all about everything, especially those mines. And do sit down. I can't imagine you'll want to eat while standing there. That's what seats are for, Mayor.
The confusion and uncertainty on the mayor's face makes Dana laugh again.
Do you need me to move?
Dana asks.
Is that the problem?
Well, I'm not trying to be rude, but
The mayor replies.
Of course.
Dana says, and scoots out of the booth. She stands and towers over the diminutive mayor. Then she mimics the gesture the mayor performed just moments earlier.
Please have a seat, Mr. Mayor.
Mayor Gantry looks even more confused, but he nods a few times, then eases between Dana and the table to get to the bench seat. He has to avert his face to the side, not to get an eyeful of Dana's chest. With a satisfied sigh, he sits down and clasps his hands together, then looks up at Dana.
thank you.
He says,
Like I said, it's tradition.
And a lovely tradition it is.
Dana says, and takes the seat the mayor had originally indicated for her to take.
Oh, Mayor, you were being chivalrous. This seat is much more comfortable. I suppose because it doesn't have your ass in it all the time.
Pardon?
Mayor Gantry asks, startled.
I said this seat is more comfortable.
Dana replies,
Probably because you sit on that side all the time. I'm guessing you don't have many guests during breakfast?
Oh, yes. No.
Mayor Gantry says.
Guests stop by the table, but don't usually sit down. Everyone is busy and has somewhere to be, something to do.
Especially during festival time, I suppose.
Dana says.
But I see a wedding ring. Doesn't your wife join you?
Oh, this.
Mayor Gantry says and fingers the band on his left finger.
My wife passed away several years ago.
I am sorry to hear that.
Dana says. She reaches across the table and takes the mayor's hands in hers.
That must have been hard. How long ago was it?
24 years.
Mayor Gantry says.
The same year I became mayor of Kohlsville. Sometimes life teaches you to take the good with the, bad.
Hard to celebrate a win like that when you're dealing with such a loss, I am sure.
Dana says, and pulls her hands back.
But I am curious about something.
Yes, and what's that?
Mayor Gantry asks as he raises a hand and gets a waitress's attention.
Most widowers move their rings to the right hand after a year or so,
Dana says.
but you kept yours on the left. May I ask why?
I suppose if I was interested in meeting someone else, I'd move it.
Mayor Gantry answers.
But my heart has known only one true love.
Only one?
Dana asks.
Yes, ma'am.
Mayor Gantry says as a woman in her late middle age walks up, an apron on over a simple blouse and a long skirt.
Hello, Millie.
Mayor,
The woman says.
you have a guest?
Yes, I do.
Mayor Gantry says.
Millie, this is Dana Alighieri. She and her crew are here to do a news story on our little festivities.
Is that so?
Millie replies. She fixes a stony gaze on Dana.
And why is that?
Now, Millie.
Mayor Gantry says.
No, it's fine.
Dana says, waving the mayor off.
I know how small towns can be. A flashy stranger like me looks like trouble the second I set foot on the sidewalk. I've been doing this for a very long time, so it's not my first time. You didn't answer my question,
Millie says. The mayor clears his throat and picks up a menu.
We're both going to have coffee.
Mayor Gantry begins.
Hold on, Mayor.
Dana says.
Let me answer the question before we put in our order. It'd be rude not to.
The mayor slowly closes his menu and looks back and forth between Dana and Millie with growing apprehension.
I was born in a small village.
Dana says.
Grew up there. But life took me in a different direction, so I left. But I have always had an affinity for small towns and the hardworking folks that live in them. So I try to tell their stories as often as I can. And where do you tell these stories, if I may ask?
Millie asks anyway.
Miss Dana is a reporter with WCKD.
Mayor Gantry says.
Haven't heard of it.
Millie says.
It's not in New England.
Dana says.
We're from down south. Down south?
Millie asks.
Where exactly? South of here, that's for sure.
Dana says with a laugh. Then she picks up her menu, opens it, and looks straight at Millie.
I'll have the full harvest and black coffee. Leave the pot, if you don't mind. That's a lot of food,
Millie says without writing Dana's order down.
I'm a lot of woman,
Dana says, her eyes still on Millie. The two women stare at each other for a full minute before Millie turns to the mayor.
The usual, Mayor?
Millie asks.
Not today, Millie.
Mayor Gantry says, and glances quickly at Dana, then back to Millie.
Just coffee. And maybe a scone.
A scone?
Millie asks.
You do know what day it is, don't you?
I do, Millie.
Mayor Gantry replies, his voice getting tight.
But with a guest joining me, I think coffee and a scone is best.
I have the distinct feeling I'm missing something.
Dana interjects.
Not to be too nosy, but it is kind of my job. What's your usual, Mayor?
Mayor Gantry looks from Dana to Millie, back to Dana, back to Millie, then sighs.
Millie makes an amazing blood sausage,
Mayor Gantry finally says.
I have that and scrambled eggs. On the second day of the festivities, though, I skip the eggs and go for a double portion of blood sausage.
Except today you're having a scone,
Millie says with contempt.
Don't break tradition because of me.
Dana says.
You know what? I'll have a side of blood sausage with my full harvest. With? You want more food?
Millie asks.
Unless my money is no good here,
Dana says.
Oh, no, Dana. This is on me.
Mayor Gantry says.
I wouldn't think of it,
Dana says.
Plus, I have an expense account, which gives me an idea.
Dana stands and turns to the rest of the cafe.
Hello, folks. I'm Dana Alighieri from WCKD,
she announces.
And breakfast is on me.
The diners stare at her for a couple of seconds. Then a few lift their coffee cups in salute, as a few nod a weak thanks before going back to their meals and their private conversations.
Not exactly the response I was expecting,
Dana says as she sits back down.
You're a stranger,
Millie says.
I'll be back with the coffee.
Then she's gone from the booth and hurrying back behind the counter to the kitchen, leaving a whiff of her contempt behind.
I must apologize for Millie,
Mayor Gantry says.
She's had a rough couple of years and hasn't been as enthusiastic as the rest of us come festival time.
Oh dear, what happened?
Dana asks.
I'm sorry?
Mayor Gantry responds.
You said she's had it rough the last couple of years.
Dana says.
Like how?
Oh, that's not for me to say.
Mayor Gantry replies.
You don't need to go into full details, but a little nugget wouldn't hurt.
Dana says.
I am here to catch not just the flavor of the festivities, but the lives that make it all happen.
Mayor Gantry swallows hard, then looks about. Millie is still back in the kitchen, her voice echoing out into the dining room as she calls out orders.
Well, to be honest, she and her man were having troubles,
Mayor Gantry says. He leans across the table. Dana leans in too.
He liked to drink.
Oh, right,
Dana says.
Was it a messy divorce?
Unfortunately, no,
Mayor Gantry says.
Unfortunately?
Dana asks, surprised.
Most people try to avoid a messy divorce.
No, I mean there was no divorce.
Mayor Gantry explains.
One night they had a fight and he left. He's a minor now.
Dana waits for the mayor to finish. When he doesn't, she leans back.
Is that all?
Dana asks.
He became a minor and now they're split up?
The mayor nods sadly.
I'm afraid so.
Dana glances over her shoulder toward the kitchen and the sound of Millie's voice.
Poor woman. It must have been hard to leave things unresolved like that.
Dana says, then returns her attention to the mayor.
I assume things are unresolved.
Well, they haven't spoken since, so that's about as unresolved as you can get.
Mayor Gantry says.
That happen a lot around here?
Dana asks.
Coffee!
Millie says, suddenly at Dana's elbow. She sets down 2 mugs. The one she places in front of the mayor has the words, "Best gosh darn mayor," written in block letters on it. The one she sets in front of Dana has 2 chips on the rim and the handle is cracked, looking like it'll break right off the moment Dana picks it up. Millie pours coffee into the mayor's mug, then she sets the pot down in the middle of the table and walks away.
Again, I do have to apologize for her behavior.
Mayor Gantry says.
No need.
Dana responds as she pours coffee into the questionable mug.
Like you said, she's had a rough couple of years.
They sip coffee for a bit in silence. A couple of diners come by to pass pleasantries with the mayor, but none of them pay much attention to Dana before they walk off to get their days started.
Am I missing something, or are there only locals in here?
Dana asks.
Where are all the tourists?
Oh, I'm sure they're around.
Mayor Gantry says.
But sometimes they leave early.
On Halloween? That's strange.
Dana says. The mayor shrugs and smiles. Dana waits for some explanation. But just like the half story about Millie's man, he doesn't elaborate.
Well, I can get plenty of interviews with locals then.
Dana says.
Here you go.
A different waitress says as she steps up to the table, her arms lined and loaded with plates of food.
One full harvest.
The young waitress places a plate of steak, eggs, hash browns, and toast down in front of Dana. Then she shifts her weight and sets a plate of pancakes down, followed by a bowl of fruit, and finally a side plate with 6 huge sausages stacked in a pyramid.
You weren't kidding, Mayor,
Dana says as she picks up her fork and smiles at the bounty before her.
This is a lot of food.
The waitress sets 2 plates of sausages in front of the mayor. She takes a step back, looking nervous.
Can I get you 2 anything else?
She asks.
Your name, sweetheart,
Dana says. The waitress, young and innocent looking, shoots a look over her shoulder toward the kitchen.
I'm,
The waitress stammers.
Louise?
Dana asks. The waitress's eyes go wide.
It's on your name tag,
Dana says, as she stuffs her mouth full of pancakes.
I was just playing with you.
The mayor and the waitress share a look, then the mayor laughs.
Thank you, Louise.
Mayor Gantry says.
I believe we are set for now.
Okay, great.
Louise says and hurries off. Dana devours the pancakes, then pushes the empty plate to the side. She attacks the steak and eggs like she'll never eat again.
You are hungry.
Mayor Gantry says.
That should impress Millie some. She hates it when folks overorder and don't finish everything.
I've never had that problem.
Dana says, her mouth busy chewing steak and eggs.
I always eat what I order.
She grins at the mayor and he grins back. Dana can see the look on his face and she laughs.
Yeah, I know,
She says, and sets her fork down as she finishes chewing her food. After a swallow, she adds,
Not very ladylike, I get it. But sometimes the hunger just takes over and I have to devour what's in front of me.
She stabs a fork at the mayor's untouched blood sausages.
Speaking of,
She says,
get to it, Mayor. You have tradition to uphold.
Of course.
Mayor Gantry says, and picks up his fork and knife. He slices the sausages into perfect little medallions, then begins to eat. Dana laughs some more as she stabs one of her sausages.
Ah, Mayor, you gotta really dig in.
Dana says, and takes a huge bite of the speared sausage.
Life is short, you know?
Shorter for some more than others.
Mayor Gantry says after chewing his bite.
How do you mean?
Dana asks, finishing off the sausage before going back to her steak and eggs.
Oh, I was just thinking of my wife.
He replies.
The anniversary of her death is tomorrow.
On Hallowmas?
Dana asks, her eyebrows shooting up.
That's called burying the lead, Mayor.
She finishes chewing, downs her mug of coffee, refills it, then settles back in her seat.
I had no idea how personal this festival must feel to you each year.
Dana says.
Tell me about it if you don't mind. Of course, I understand if it's too painful or too personal, but I'd love to hear your story. There are no cameras here, so this will be off the record.
You don't need to hear about me.
Mayor Gantry says.
That was a long time ago. And you're here for the town, not little old me. Full?
Millie barks as she appears at Dana's elbow again. Dana casually turns her head and looks up at the woman.
Enjoying this great coffee while we have a little conversation break,
Dana says.
Don't you worry, ma'am. I'll have these plates polished clean by the next time you come by.
She downs her coffee again, refills the mug, then holds out the pot.
Well, after you get us a fresh one of these, that is,
Dana says. Millie doesn't look at the pot. Her eyes are on Dana. Then she glances down at the pile of sausages that's one short.
You already ate one,
Millie says, surprised.
How do you feel? I'm sorry,
Dana asks, still holding the coffee pot out.
I asked you how you like it.
Millie says.
That's not what you said,
Dana responds and shrugs.
but I do have to say it was delicious. I'm a big fan of blood sausage. And I do have to say yours is one of the finest I've ever tasted. Got a certain zing to it. Is that smoked paprika? I'll get this filled for you.
Millie says without answering the question.
You need anything else, Mayor?
No, Millie, thank you.
Mayor Gantry says. Millie walks off, and Dana sets her mug back down.
We can talk later about your wife.
Dana says.
I should finish this fine food before she gets back. I did promise.
And Dana does just that. She tears into what's left on her plates and has almost every bite gone by the time Millie returns with a fresh pot.
You lied.
Millie says, setting the pot in the middle of the table. Dana scoops up the 2 bites of hash browns left and stuffs them into her mouth.
Not anymore.
Dana says and smiles wide, showing hash browns smeared across her top teeth. Millie frowns and walks off.
You have an interesting way with people,
Mayor Gantry says, then takes a few more bites of his sausage.
In my line of work, you have to keep people on their toes.
Dana says.
That's how I get the best stories.
I see.
Mayor Gantry says.
No, you don't. But I appreciate you being polite.
Dana says. She leans back, pats her belly, then scoots out of the booth and stands up.
Gonna go pay the tab.
Miss Alligari, you really don't need...
Mayor Gantry starts.
Dana, and it's my pleasure, Mayor. Be right back.
Dana leaves the mayor and walks casually to the register by the door. She pulls out her wallet and slips a credit card from out of a pocket, then taps it on the counter by the register as she waits. It takes a few minutes, but finally Louise comes by.
I'm sorry, but we haven't totaled all the meals up yet.
Louise says.
It'll be a few minutes. How about you charge me what you think the total will be and add 25% for a margin of error, then another 30% on top of that for the wonderful service.
Dana says, and sticks the card out at Louise.
Okay,
Louise replies. She slides a calculator out from under the counter and rapidly adds up number after number. Then she blinks at the total and looks up at Dana.
This is a big bill, ma'am. Are you sure? Of course I am,
Dana says.
I'm a fan of big bills.
She leans over the counter at Louise and whispers,
Especially when they come due.
Louise frowns, then takes the card and runs it. She prints out the receipt, hands it and a pen to Dana, and watches as Dana signs it, then adds even more for the tip.
Get yourself something nice,
Dana says, then slides her card into her wallet and walks back to the mayor's booth.
Ready, Mayor? I think it's freshen up time.
The mayor blinks and gulps down his coffee, then stands up in a hurry.
Of course,
He says.
You didn't finish your sausages.
Dana says. The mayor looks down at the table and the few sausage medallions left on his plate.
Oh, yes, well, I'm full.
He says.
Wouldn't want to upset Millie now, would we?
Dana says.
Well, no, I guess we wouldn't.
Mayor Gantry says with a nervous chuckle. He leans over and forks the last few medallions into his mouth, then stands and chews quickly. Once he swallows, he holds out a hand and says,
After you, Dana.
Thank you, Mayor.
Dana says, and leads the way out of the diner. It's a short walk to the Phoenix Inn.
Do you have bags?
Mayor Gantry asks as they approach the inn.
In the van.
Dana says.
I can have someone fetch them for you.
Mayor Gantry says.
No need.
Dana replies.
Locke knows what to do.
Mayor Gantry frowns but doesn't press the issue.
Well, here we are.
He says as they stand at the bottom of the steps that lead up to a grand porch set on a gorgeous 3-story Victorian home.
The Phoenix Inn.
I stayed at a Phoenix Inn once.
Dana says.
I believe it was in Tulsa. Could have been Toledo, though.
Those are quite a distance apart.
Mayor Gantry says.
You have no idea.
Dana replies.
But that was a rundown hotel chain. This lovely place is just cute as a bug and twice as quaint.
We're proud of it.
Mayor Gantry says, and leads Dana up the porch steps.
It's a historic landmark, you know.
Oh? How so?
Dana asks, just as the front door opens.
Well, this must be our celebrity guest.
An older, tall, thin woman says as she smiles at Dana. She looks like a severe schoolmistress who has found no peace in retirement.
I'm Mrs. Holstetter, and I am simply delighted to be your host for the festival.
Before Dana can respond, a sharp whistle rings out. Everyone on the porch turns to see Locke standing across the square on the grass, staring directly at Dana.
Are we good, Locke?
Dana calls out.
We're good.
Locke responds. Folks walking about look confused by the shouting, and a few put some distance between themselves and Locke.
No hiccups?
Dana asks.
None.
Locke says.
It'll go off without a hitch.
Wonderful.
Dana replies, then turns back to Mrs. Holstetter.
My apologies, Mrs. Holstetter. Just a little broadcast business. How exciting,
Mrs. Holstetter says. Dana smiles wide as she catches the lack of sincerity in the woman's voice.
Do you have a moment to give me a tour of your beautiful establishment?
Dana asks.
I'm sure you're too busy, being a woman running her own business, so I understand if now is not a good time. Oh dear me, Miss Allighieri,
Mrs. Holstetter says.
I made sure to have time to show you the Phoenix.
She leans around Dana and smiles out at Locke, who has already turned around and is walking toward the news van.
Will your cameraman be joining us? Not right now,
Dana says, and leans too so she blocks Mrs. Holstetter's view of the news van.
We'll grab footage after I know what we need. Maybe we can get a few minutes with you on camera later? How exciting,
Mrs. Holstetter says without meaning it.
I'll leave you two to your tour,
Mayor Gantry says.
I have town business to attend to.
Of course, Mayor,
Dana says.
Perhaps we can catch up for dinner later before the night's festivities begin.
I am going to be awfully busy, but I think I can make that happen.
Mayor Gantry says.
I'll meet you at your booth,
Dana says.
Say around 7? Or is that too late?
Oh no, 7 is fine.
Mayor Gantry says.
But we do have other restaurants, you know.
Does Millie's not serve dinner?
Dana asks.
No, it does.
Mayor Gantry begins to say.
Great.
Dana interrupts.
I think Millie and I hit it off, and I'd love to keep that rapport going.
Mayor Gantry frowns, looks at Mrs. Holstetter, looks back to Dana, and shrugs.
I'll see you there at 7 then,
Mayor Gantry says.
It'll have to be a short dinner though, I'm afraid to say. My festival kickoff speech is at 8:30 sharp.
I thought you said festivities started yesterday,
Dana responds.
Yes, well, this being Halloween and all, I have a special speech planned.
Mayor Gantry says.
The mayor's duties never end. So true,
Mrs. Holstetter says.
Have a wonderful day, Mayor. Don't you worry. I'll take good care of Miss Alighieri here.
Please, call me Dana,
Dana says.
I just couldn't, dear.
Mrs. Holstetter says.
I'm old-fashioned that way.
Of course,
Dana says, and ups the wattage of her grin.
Now, I just can't wait to see your wonderful establishment.
Do you have bags?
Mrs. Holstetter asks.
In the van,
Dana says.
Oh, I'll have Thomas fetch them.
Mrs. Holstetter says and clasps her hands.
Thomas!
That really isn't necessary,
Dana says.
Nonsense.
Mrs. Holstetter replies.
Thomas!
No, really, there's no need.
Dana says and points to the square.
There goes the van.
The news van passes by and Dana gives a wave to Locke, who is in the passenger seat. He frowns and gives her a half-hearted wave back.
Oh my, what bad timing,
Mrs. Holstetter says.
Where are they headed to, if I may ask?
The old mines,
Dana says.
You know, with the tragic history of those mines, they're just perfect for a little color.
Color?
Mrs. Holstetter asks.
Footage to spice the story up.
Dana says.
Add a little more than just me talking into the camera. Tragedy and Halloween go perfect together.
Well, I'm glad our town's tragedies can help spice things up for you,
Mrs. Holstetter says.
Every story needs a little color.
I'm sorry. Have I offended you?
Dana asks.
Nonsense.
Mrs. Holstetter says with a wave of her hand.
Ignore this old woman. I've lived here all my life, so sometimes I get set in my thinking.
I understand completely,
Dana says, and nods at the inn's front door.
Can I have that tour now?
It would be my pleasure,
Mrs. Holstetter says, and steps aside for Dana to enter the inn. As Dana crosses the threshold, Mrs. Holstetter steps to the edge of the porch and watches the news van drive off. Dana glances over her shoulder and catches this. She also catches the silent interaction Mrs. Holstetter has with the gentleman dressed in coveralls standing at the edge of the grass. She nods, he nods, then he hurries off to a beat-up pickup truck parked by the curb with the town's seal emblazoned on the rusty door. The truck roars to life and races out of the square, headed in the same direction as the news van.
Oh, no need to wait for me, dear,
Mrs. Holstetter says when she turns to see Dana watching her.
Go on in, go on in.
Dana nods and walks all the way into the inn. She pauses at the main desk and smiles.
This piece has to be hundreds of years old,
Dana says as she runs her fingers along the smooth, shiny wood of the inn's tall check-in desk.
Early colonial, yes?
Very early colonial,
Mrs. Holstetter says.
It was my ancestors.
I'll have to hear the full story once you give me the tour,
Dana says.
What's in here?
Dana moves off from the desk and walks briskly into a sitting room set off to the side of the entry hall.
I usually begin the tour out here, Miss Alighieri,
Mrs. Holstetter says.
That room I save for last.
Why's that?
Dana asks, retreating from the sitting room.
You'll have to wait to find out,
Mrs. Holstetter says with a smile that does not even come close to reaching her eyes.
Now, where did Thomas get off to?
Mrs. Holstetter pulls a whistle on a chain from out of the collar of her dress. She places it to her lips and gives a hard blow. No sound comes out.
I'm sorry, but is that a dog whistle?
Dana asks.
Thomas has very good hearing,
Mrs. Holstetter says. A door behind and to the side of the check-in desk bursts open, and an old man dressed in a thick flannel shirt and green dungarees limps out. His eyes are barely visible under the thick eyebrows and even thicker mat of curly white hair that droops down over his face.
Thomas, Miss Alighieri here will have her bags delivered later. Please see that they are placed in her room the moment they arrive.
Mrs. Holstetter says. Thomas grunts.
Now, None of that, Thomas,
Mrs. Holstetter says, then turns to Dana.
My apologies. He can be a grumpy cuss sometimes.
Can he?
Dana asks.
I didn't understand what he said.
Well, then there is nothing to worry about.
Mrs. Holstetter says.
That is all, Thomas. Be gone now.
Thomas limps past the desk, past the two women, and out onto the front porch where he turns his head up and lets out a long howl. Somewhere in the town, the howl is answered, and Thomas limps down the porch steps and crosses the square as fast as his limp will let him.
He'll be back,
Mrs. Holstetter says, then gestures to a grand flight of stairs.
I'll show you the inn, and then we'll finish in your room. You can freshen up there. However, I do wish you had your bags.
You really don't need to worry about those,
Dana says.
They are fine in the van.
Well, you heard what I said to Thomas,
Mrs. Holstetter responds.
I'll have them brought up immediately once you have them in hand.
Dana's phone rings, and the sound of J.S. Bach's Toccata and Fugue in D minor echoes through the inn.
So sorry,
Dana says and holds up a finger.
I have to take this. Be right back.
Dana steps back out onto the porch and answers the call.
We still good?
Dana asks.
Good as can be.
Locke replies on the other end.
How do the mines look?
Dana asks.
About how you'd expect them to look.
Locke says.
Dangerous and deadly.
Good.
Dana says.
Get plenty of B-roll.
That's my job.
Locke replies.
Any sign of the miners?
Dana asks.
Not yet, but we haven't gone very deep.
Locke says.
We're still at the main entrance. I doubt you can reach me once we go inside.
We? Virgil is going in with you?
Dana asks.
He never leaves the van.
He said he's curious,
Locke says, his voice bored.
which means he smells something ripe.
Probably the miners, if my guess is correct,
Dana says.
Probably.
Locke says.
We'll be here a while.
I figured that you would be.
Dana says.
Be careful.
Seriously?
Locke says with a laugh.
You know what I mean.
Dana says. She turns to look at Mrs. Holstetter and jumps when she sees the woman standing directly behind her.
I have to go.
Me too.
Locke says.
Some local just pulled up in a pickup.
Cooperate and let things play out how they need to.
Dana says.
And be nice.
Nice is my middle name.
Locke says and hangs up.
Everything all right?
Mrs. Holstetter asks.
Peachy keen.
Dana says.
Now, let's get this show on the road. I'm dying to hear all the history.
The tour takes considerably longer than Dana would like, but she patiently listens to each and every story Mrs. Holstetter tells her, oohing and eyeing in all the right places. When they finally reach her room, Dana is ready to pull her hair out.
I'll leave you to freshen up,
Mrs. Holstetter says, after giving Dana the history of the room.
Bathroom is through that door. Fresh towels are hanging on the rack. And the soap is handmade by one of our local artisans.
Lovely,
Dana says.
but I can wait until after the tour. I don't want to miss the big finale in that sitting room.
You won't. Don't worry.
Mrs. Holstetter says. Then she leans in conspiratorially.
There's some body spritz in the medicine cabinet. I know you've had a long journey getting here.
Huh. Thank you.
Dana says.
Just meet me in the sitting room when you're fresh.
Mrs. Holstetter says and walks out of the room.
Don't be too long now. Big day and bigger evening ahead.
As soon as Mrs. Holstetter leaves, Dana gives her pits a quick sniff. Not fresh, but definitely not stinky.
Bitch.
Dana mutters and heads to the bathroom. She uses the facilities, then washes her hands. As soon as the bar of soap hits the hot water, an odor like rotten meat wafts up at Dana from the sink.
Damn.
She says, and carefully brings the soap to her nose. She jerks back and laughs.
Is the local artisan sourcing ingredients from roadkill?
Then she inspects the soap a little closer. She picks at a spot toward the center until she finds something very interesting.
A fingernail? Really?
Dana muses.
A different kind of roadkill, I guess.
Dana laughs and sets the soap down, then thoroughly rinses her hands. Yet no matter how hard she scrubs, that smell of death lingers on her skin. She opens the medicine cabinet and finds the body spritz Mrs. Holstetter said would be there, and also finds a jar of hand cream. Wary, Dana unscrews the lid from the cream, then immediately screws it back on.
Roadkill is the theme, I see,
Dana says. She doesn't even bother with the body spritz and closes the medicine cabinet. Then she fluffs her hair, checks herself in the mirror, and leaves the bathroom. When she reaches the sitting room, Mrs. Holstetter is in a close conversation with Thomas. The moment she walks in, Mrs. Holstetter steps back from Thomas and shoos him away. He limps past Dana, brushing her shoulder as he walks by.
Everything okay?
Dana asks.
Perfect. Why?
Mrs. Holstetter responds.
No reason,
Dana says with a shrug.
You looked like you were having a serious conversation.
Nothing to worry yourself over, dear.
Mrs. Holstetter says.
Just an old married couple talking as old married couples do.
Dana freezes in place.
Did I say something wrong, dear?
Mrs. Holstetter asks.
Thomas is your husband?
Dana asks.
Of course.
Mrs. Holstetter says.
Did I not mention that during our tour?
No, you skipped that part,
Dana says. She looks over her shoulder, but Thomas is gone from sight. She returns her attention to Mrs. Holstetter and brings her grin back up to full power.
Okay, I'm ready for the story.
Have a seat, dear,
Mrs. Holstetter says, and indicates a couch by a bay window. Dana nods and takes a seat. Mrs. Holstetter crosses to a small fireplace and leans an arm on the mantel as she looks up at an old portrait hanging on the wall.
This is my great-great-great-great-grandmother Holstetter,
Mrs. Holstetter says.
She was one of the founders of Kohlsville.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but did you say her name was Holstetter too?
Dana asks.
Yes, of course,
Mrs. Holstetter says.
But you're married,
Dana said.
To Mr. Holstetter.
Thomas,
Mrs. Holstetter says and nods.
That's right.
Are you two related somehow?
Dana asks.
I'm trying not to be rude, but I'm sure you understand my confusion.
I'm sorry, but I don't, dear,
Mrs. Holstetter says.
Husbands and wives usually share the same last name, unless you are one of those modern working women who flaunts tradition. Are you one of those, Miss Allighieri? Is there a Mr. back home with a different name?
No Mr. anything at home,
Dana says.
But could we get back to your name real quick? I just want to make sure I have all the facts right.
No facts to get right other than the spelling,
Mrs. Holstetter says.
It's spelled Holstetter. Do you need to write that down?
I can remember that,
Dana says, and before she can continue her inquiry, Mrs. Holstetter continues her story.
Great-grandmother Holstetter helped found Kohlsville,
Mrs. Holstetter says, placing an emphasis on her ancestor's last name.
She was part of the original coven.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Dana asks.
Did you say coven?
No, dear, I said dozen.
Mrs. Holstetter replies and shakes her head.
You must have misheard. I'm sure you're tired from all your traveling.
No, I'm wide awake,
Dana says.
But I could have sworn you said coven.
Well, I didn't,
Mrs. Holstetter says.
How about we finish this story later? You should go rest in your room. Maybe apply a little more body spritz. It can be so soothing that I find myself wanting to just curl up and take a nap after a spray of it and sleep the day away.
That's a weird thing to say,
Dana replies.
And I didn't use the body spritz.
I know,
Mrs. Holstetter says.
Perhaps you should.
The two women stare at each other for a minute. Then the phone rings from the check-in desk, and Mrs. Holstetter puts a hand to her chest.
If you'll excuse me,
Mrs. Holstetter says.
I need to get that. I just can't trust Thomas to answer the phone.
Go right ahead,
Dana says. As soon as Mrs. Holstetter is gone, Dana takes out her phone and snaps a photo of the portrait above the fireplace.
This just gets better and better,
Dana says. Then she shoots a text to Locke, asking him how it's going at the mines. She waits for a response while also trying to listen to Mrs. Holstetter's conversation from the check-in desk. But the older woman is talking in a hushed tone, and Dana can't make out a word. Dana moves closer to the sitting room door, but Mrs. Holstetter's voice goes even quieter when she does. When Dana hears the clack of the phone being hung up, Dana moves back to the couch and retakes her seat. She glances at her phone. Still no response.
Everything all right?
Mrs. Holstetter asks.
I was going to ask you the same thing,
Dana replies, putting her phone away.
Just some town business,
Mrs. Holstetter says, and returns to her spot in front of the fireplace.
Now, Grandmother Holstetter was very influential in how the town charter was set up. She and the rest of the original dozen made sure that this town would be taken care of for generations to come.
How so? Dana asks.
By ensuring that as long as we all do our civic duty and tend to the town,
Mrs. Holstetter answers,
as well as tending to the mines, then all will be well.
Like a trust or something? Dana asks.
A trust?
Mrs. Holstetter says.
You know, like funds set aside that can be invested and grow,
Dana says.
That's how many trusts work. Something like that, yes,
Mrs. Holstetter says.
Very much something like that. Can you give me specifics?
Dana asks.
On what, dear?
Mrs. Holstetter replies.
The trust,
Dana says.
How it was set up, what the terms were, any stipulations. I know trusts tend to have stipulations that have to be followed. Who were the original trustees? All the facts, if you can. There is no trust, dear,
Mrs. Holstetter says.
But you just said that,
Dana begins.
I said it is like that, yes,
Mrs. Holstetter interrupts.
But I did not say it was a trust. Sorry, I misunderstood,
Dana says.
Please continue.
The phone rings again.
I am so sorry,
Mrs. Holstetter says.
I'll be right back.
Dana watches her go, then gets her phone back out. She tries lock once more, but there's still no response. When Mrs. Holstetter returns the second time, Dana stands up and holds out her hand. Mrs. Holstetter stares at the hand like it's a bloody stump dripping on her antique rug.
I think I'm going to get some air and walk around town for a bit,
Dana says.
Also, I need to call my crew. They aren't answering my texts. You're leaving?
Mrs. Holstetter asks, still staring at Dana's offered hand.
But I haven't finished the story. And I can't wait for you to do so,
Dana says, and holds up her phone, giving it a little wiggle.
But business first, I'm afraid. Yes, of course,
Mrs. Holstetter says, still staring at the hand.
Right. Well, I'll see you later on,
Dana says and lets her hand drop to her side.
Oh, before I go, is there anyone you would recommend I speak to while I'm out and about? Any shopkeepers or maybe other descendants of the original dozen? They are all preparing for tonight,
Mrs. Holstetter says.
You'll be introduced later. Yes, I am sure everyone is busy,
Dana says and walks out of the sitting room.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Holstetter. This place is just so lovely.
She pauses before going.
I asked the mayor earlier, but I'm still curious,
Dana says.
Where are all the tourists? I thought there would be so many more, but from the looks of it, it's just me and my crew. Then you will get all the attention,
Mrs. Holstetter says. Dana waits for more, but when the woman doesn't continue, Dana nods and leaves the inn, hurrying down the port steps and out onto the square. A horn blares and Dana jumps as a pickup truck comes to a screeching halt just inches from her. Dana realizes it's the same truck and driver that left earlier. Raising a hand in greeting and also to say hold on, Dana moves around to the driver's window and taps on it. The man in coveralls only stares straight ahead. Dana taps again. The man keeps staring ahead. Dana taps a third time. Finally, with a long, heavy sigh, the man rolls the window down, but he doesn't look at Dana.
Help you?
The man asks.
Yes. You didn't happen to just come from the mines, did you?
Dana asks.
Yup.
The man replies.
Oh, good.
Dana says.
Did you see my crew?
Nope.
The man says, then rolls the window back up and drives off. Dana frowns at the sight of the truck driving away, and then turns and looks at the Phoenix Inn. Mrs. Holstetter is standing in the sitting room's bay window, staring at Dana. Dana waves. Mrs. Holstetter does not wave back. After a moment, the older woman retreats into the shadows of the sitting room, lost from Dana's sight.
That's unsettling,
Dana says. She lets out a long sigh of her own that rivals the truck driver's. Then she looks about the square, spies a couple walking a dog in the grass, and sets off after them.
Excuse me.
Dana calls out. The couple continue walking as if she's not there.
Excuse me.
Dana shouts. For a brief moment, Dana believes the couple are about to pause, but instead they increase their pace and hurry their dog walking right off the grass and over to a Kia parked at the curb.
Never mind then,
Dana says. She places her hands on her hips and surveys the square again, giving it a real glance over, which is something she hadn't yet bothered to do. That's why she'd sent Lockout with his rig. He could capture the feel of the place. Dana was there to run things and look amazing once the cameras rolled on her. Dana says, spying an old man seated on a park bench just at the corner of the gazebo. The man is reading a thick, old book while sipping from a styrofoam cup. She walks briskly through the grass to the old man, then stands right in front of him, blocking the sun and the light he's obviously using to read by.
Help you with something, ma'am?
He asks without looking up. He takes another sip from his cup, then sets it down on the empty space on the bench, effectively blocking Dana from taking that seat.
I'm Dana Alighieri with WCKD,
Dana says.
We're here to do a story on...
I know why you're here.
The old man says.
Is that so?
Dana responds.
I didn't catch your name.
I didn't throw it.
The old man says. Then he marks the page he's on and closes the book. He sets it in his lap, picks up his coffee cup, then slowly glances upward at Dana.
If you're gonna bother me, you might as well sit.
Thank you,
Dana says and takes the invitation. Once settled next to the old man, she turns slightly to him and gives him her biggest smile.
Don't bother,
The old man says and rolls his eyes.
You're a striking woman, but that's about it.
I'm unsure how to take that, Mr.
Dana responds.
Malcolm Kohl's.
The old man says.
Kohl's? Wait, like the town?
Dana asks, looking very surprised.
I thought this town was named after the mines.
It would be if there were coal mines,
Kohl's says.
but they aren't.
Oh, I just assumed.
Dana begins.
Which is always how tragedy starts.
Kohl's says.
So let me put you out of your misery.
I'm sorry?
Dana replies, taken aback.
The mystery of the mines.
Kohl's says with a grin. He has a very slight mustache and it crinkles, the white hairs catching the sunlight.
Feldspar and mica. No coal.
Feldspar and mica.
Dana echoes and nods.
Good to know. Thank you.
Feldspar is good for creativity.
Kohl's says.
Did you know Kohlsville has the most New York Times best-selling writers per capita of any New England town? Not to mention the potters and glassblowers.
Dana fumbles her phone out and swipes to the voice recorder.
Do you mind?
She asks.
Not at all.
Kohl's says.
I'll repeat it for you.
And he does.
What about mica?
Dana asks.
Anything special there?
Feelings of hope and stability.
Kohl's says.
We're a creative, stable bunch here in Kohlsville.
I imagine you are.
Dana says with a laugh.
So, and not to assume, I am guessing you are a descendant of the original dozen?
That I am.
Kohl's says.
My family founded this town. There's been a Kohl's here ever since.
Mrs. Holstetter was telling me a little about the original dozen.
Dana says.
I thought she said coven at first, though. Isn't that funny?
Easy mistake.
Kohl's says.
Maybe.
Dana says.
But I'm fairly good at hearing comprehension. Kinda have to be in my line of work.
So you think Mrs. Holstetter was talking about a coven then?
Kohl's asks and swivels on the bench so he's facing Dana directly.
Covens usually mean witches. That's what you think Mrs. Holstetter was talking about?
Like I said, it's funny,
Dana said.
but I must have heard incorrectly.
Must have.
Kohl says.
Will you be joining us tonight for the festivities?
Of course.
Dana replies.
Wouldn't miss it for the world.
Kohl's looks around the square.
And where is your camera crew?
He asks.
They went to get footage of the mines and haven't come back yet.
Dana says. She nods at her phone, which is still recording.
And they aren't responding to my texts.
Technology can be spotty in Kohlsville.
Kohl says. Then he abruptly stands up, moving much faster than Dana thought a man of his age can move.
I'll see you at the festivities, Miss Alighieri.
Kohl says.
Good day.
Oh, good day.
Dana says as the man walks off.
And call me Dana, please.
He raises a hand in acknowledgement, but doesn't look back. That's when Dana realizes he left his book.
Oh, Mr. Coles!
Dana calls out as she picks up the book, stands, and hurries to the man. She glances at the book and stops in her tracks. The leather is old, very old, and it has a feel to it, like some type of animal skin, but much different. There is no lettering on the cover or the spine, but there is a symbol. A symbol of a goat's head with 4 horns. Dana cracks open the book and is even more surprised. The pages are blank.
Thank you.
Kohl says, suddenly in front of Dana, his hand out.
It's a family heirloom.
There's nothing in it.
Dana says, as she hands the book to Kohl's.
Oh, that is far from true, Miss Alighieri.
Kohl says with a grin. Then he turns on his heels and walks off, leaving Dana standing in the grass, looking confused.
Well, the reviews aren't wrong.
Dana says to herself.
This town really puts on the weird for Halloween.
A blood-curdling scream rips across the square.
Sorry!
An amplified, squeaky voice says on a PA system.
Wrong knob!
Dana shakes her head, looks around, and just starts walking. She whiles the time away by window shopping in the many quaint shops the square hosts. A yarn store with intricately knitted sweaters and blankets and stuffed animals catches her eye. But when she tries the door, it rattles and won't budge. Locked. The next shop is the same. And the next. Dana glances at her phone and sees it's already well past lunchtime, so she's unsure where everyone is. Then she notices 2 women, one young and one older, entering Millie's. She shrugs and walks over to the cafe. But when she tries the door, it's locked too. Dana presses her face against the glass and peers inside. No one is in there. Not even Millie or the other waitresses. No sign of any of the cooks or busboys. The place is dark.
Okay.
Dana says and moves on. She continues to walk the square, looking for a shop without a locked door, looking for anyone she can talk to. But the town appears to be deserted. Dana takes her phone out and tries to text Locke and Virgil, but she pauses when she sees the time.
6:30?
She says out loud. She looks up at the sky and her eyes go wide. The sun is already starting to set.
Things just got very interesting.
Dana says. There's another blood-curdling scream.
Sorry!
The amplified, squeaky voice calls out again. Dana strides over to the gazebo. By the time she reaches it, the sun is almost set behind the buildings on the west side of the square.
Hello.
Dana says as she climbs the gazebo steps. A woman pops up from behind a podium and blinks at Dana.
Oh, hi there.
She says.
You're the reporter lady.
Dana is having a hard time figuring out the woman's age. The sunset is playing tricks with her eyes because each time she blinks, it's like the woman ages a decade or gets younger by 2 decades.
Yes, I'm, Dana Alighieri from WCKD,
Dana says.
This may sound like a weird question, but where is everyone? How do you mean?
The woman replies.
What do you mean, how do I mean?
Dana responds.
None of the shops are open, and I thought I saw some women go into Millie's, but when I checked, it's closed too. No, it's not,
the woman says and points past Dana.
Millie's never closes.
Dana begins to argue, but glances over her shoulder first. The sun is set, and the shops are all lit up for the night, including Millie's. It's obvious the place is packed. Dana can clearly see people eating and enjoying themselves inside the cafe.
What the nuts?
She says.
What the nuts?
The woman echoes and laughs.
I like that. This town is something,
Dana says.
It is,
the woman says.
And welcome. We've been looking forward to your visit. Wait, I remember. You're Carly Beaumont, the town...
Dana says as she turns back to the woman. No one is there. Dana is the only one standing in the gazebo. She spins in a circle, but there is no sign of the woman at all.
Cute trick,
Dana says before leaving the gazebo. She heads directly for Millie's place. When she opens the door, the entire cafe goes silent and all eyes snap to her.
Good evening,
Dana says. There is no response.
Happy Halloween?
The silence stands for a count of 5 before everyone returns to their meals and their conversations. Dana shivers, then weaves past the tables to the mayor's booth.
Good evening, Miss Alighieri,
Mayor Gantry says as he stands up and gestures for her to take a seat. When she sits, he asks,
Did you have a good day today?
I had a weird day today,
Dana says.
Sundown sure comes fast to Kohlsville.
It depends on the night,
Mayor Gantry says. Millie walks over and sets a plate mounted with blood sausages in front of the mayor. Then she looks at Dana.
Yours will be right up,
Millie says and leaves.
But I haven't ordered anything,
Dana says futilely as Millie disappears into the kitchen.
Tradition, I'm afraid,
Mayor Gantry says as he spears a sausage and stuffs it in his mouth. He waves the empty fork at the rest of the cafe. Dana turns around and can see that everyone is eating blood sausages. Every single person.
Of course,
Dana says with a chuckle.
Tradition seems to be big here in Kohlsville.
That it is,
Mayor Gantry says, and spears a second sausage. He stuffs that in his mouth, even though he isn't done with the first one. His cheeks bulge.
Here,
Millie says, startling Dana. A plate with a huge mound of blood sausages is placed in front of Dana.
Eat up! Eat up!
Mayor Gantry says around his mouthful of sausages.
Eat up!
Someone says from one of the tables.
Yes, eat up!
Someone else says.
Eat up!
The whole cafe cries out. Then everyone laughs and goes back to their business. Dana takes a deep breath, gives the mayor a weak smile, and spears her own sausage. She takes a small bite and frowns.
Tastes different than this morning's,
Dana says.
It's festival sausage,
Mayor Gantry says.
made just for tonight. Maybe even made just for you. Now, don't be shy. You have to eat them like a local.
The mayor shoves another whole sausage in his mouth. He smiles and nods at Dana.
Go on, eat up.
He says. Dana puts the rest of the sausage into her mouth.
More.
Mayor Gantry says. Dana hesitates, then shoves another whole sausage into her mouth. The salty, iron taste of fresh blood floods over her tongue. Dana's impulse is to spit the sausage out, but instead spears one more and shoves that one in her mouth too. Then another, and another. She is almost choking on sausage when the mayor pushes his empty plate aside and leans across the table.
Chew,
He says.
there you go. Chew, keep chewing.
A quiet chant of chew, 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 chew erupts from the other diners. Dana has no other choice but to chew, 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 chew. Then she swallows, and the cafe begins to spin around her.
What's happening?
Dana asks.
Did you drug me?
In a way.
Mayor Gantry says and stands up. Hands grab Dana by her arms and shoulders and help her out of the booth. Her legs are wobbly, but the hands keep her from collapsing.
What is in those?
Dana asks as she's led away from the booth.
A little of this, a little of that.
Millie says, suddenly by Dana's elbow.
Stop doing that.
Dana says around a mouth that feels like it's full of cotton.
The real question is, who was in the sausages?
Millie says, then she's gone, replaced by a different woman.
I know you.
Dana says to the woman.
Gazebo lady. And that's where you're going right now.
The woman says as the cafe door opens and Dana is guided out onto the square. The entire town is pitch black except for the torches that light up the gazebo. Dana's vision is hazy, but she can make out a dozen robed figures standing in a circle in the gazebo. Before she can blink, Dana finds herself in the center of the circle of robed figures.
Neat trick,
Dana mutters, still being held upright by hands that she can't seem to find the owners of. The robed figures start to chant. Dana scrunches up her face.
That's not Latin,
She says.
The sacrifice will be quiet.
A voice calls out from under the hood of one of the robes.
Hush now, Miss Alighieri.
Sorry, Mr. Coles.
Dana says. She grins at being able to recognize the voice. The chanting continues and continues. Unlike how the afternoon and evening disappeared around her, the chanting feels like an eternity to Dana. Then it stops. One of the robed figures stands in front of Dana.
You have been chosen to honor the one who lives below,
The voice of Kohl's says.
Yours and your friends' sacrifices will ensure that the town of Kohlsville continues to prosper and thrive. We thank you for your gift to us. We thank you for your gift to us.
A chorus of voices echoes from out on the grass. Dana tries to swivel her head around to see the owners of the voices, but she finds she barely has the strength to keep her chin from hitting her chest.
For the one who lives below, you shall drink from the ancestors' chalice,
Kohl says. A metal cup is placed to Dana's lips and tipped upward. Thick, warm, salty liquid fills Dana's mouth. Involuntarily, she swallows and swallows until the last drop is gone.
All shall be right.
Kohl's calls out.
All shall be right.
The town responds. Then the world around Dana goes dark, and she slips off into unconsciousness. When she comes to, Dana is not very surprised at the fact she is chained to a rock wall. She blinks the sleep out of her eyes and studies her surroundings. A tunnel of sorts, although it appears she is in a small alcove just off the tunnel. Directly outside the alcove stand several men. Even with the gloom, she has an idea of who they are. The smell gives it away.
The miners are zombies?
Dana asks as she looks right and then left. To her right is Locke, chained up and looking bored. To her left is Virgil, asleep and snoring.
Yep.
Locke says.
Some jerk from the town showed up and called them while we were in here. They do the chaining to the walls.
They didn't try to eat you?
Dana asks.
Different zombies.
Locke says.
Not the undead kind.
Ah, got it.
Dana says.
Where's everyone else?
Just outside.
Locke says.
Someone keeps coming in to see if you're awake.
They need me awake?
Dana asks.
They need us all awake.
Locke says, and nods his head at Virgil.
Give him a kick, will ya?
Dana is able to just stretch her leg out far enough to wrap Virgil's shin with her heel. He grunts and opens his eyes.
Still here,
He says, then closes his eyes.
Boring. Wake up, dumbass.
Locke snaps. Virgil's eyes open again and he frowns.
Whatever,
He says.
Can we go yet?
No,
Dana says.
they aren't finished with us.
Louise, the waitress from Millie's, comes hurrying down the tunnel, then skids to a stop when she sees Dana.
They're awake!
She yells over her shoulder.
Hello, Louise.
Dana says.
A woman picks up the tab on everyone's meals and ends up chained to the wall of a feldspar mine. Go figure, right?
Micah,
Locke says.
the feldspar mine is down the road.
But we're in the correct mine, yes?
Dana asks.
I doubt they'd put chains in the wrong mine.
Locke responds.
That'd be pretty stupid.
Footsteps echo through the tunnel as the entire town, this time all dressed in robes, walks towards Dana and her crew.
Mayor, Mr. Kohls, Mrs. Holstetter, Miss Beaumont.
Dana says, recognizing some of the faces shadowed under the robes' hoods who lead the rest of the townsfolk.
I'm guessing the other 8 of you are descendants of the original coven.
You are not unintelligent.
Kohl says.
I would introduce you, but there is no need anymore.
Oh? And why's that?
Dana asks.
Because your time has come.
Kohls says. He raises his arms over his head. Everyone mimics the motion.
Hold up.
Dana says.
Aren't you worried people will come looking for us?
Kohls lowers his arms. The rest do the same.
Visitors ignore the warnings and are lost to the mines all the time here.
Kohls says.
I doubt anyone will bat an eye if an intrepid reporter and her crew go missing.
Intrepid reporter? You flatter me, Mr. Kohls.
Dana smiles and waves a manacled hand.
All right, sorry to interrupt. Go ahead with your little thingy.
Kohls pauses, then raises his arms once more, as do the rest of the townsfolk.
The one who lives below!
Kohls calls out.
As the clock strikes midnight, we bring you your sacrifice on this holiest of Holomus.
The town echoes his words. Then everyone goes silent.
Is that it?
Dana asks.
No more chanting?
Your flippant attitude insults us and yourself, Miss Alighieri.
Kohls says.
It would be wise for you not to insult this holy moment.
Or what?
Dana asks.
You'll just not sacrifice us?
Locke snorts and tries to cover up his laugh by coughing. Kohls lowers his hood and frowns at Dana. Then he stares down into the darkness of the tunnel beyond.
What is happening?
Mayor Gantry whispers from Kohl's left.
Why has the one who lives below not appeared? I am unsure.
Kohl says.
Try again,
Mrs. Holstetter says. Kohls raises his arms once more and repeats the same phrase as before. The townsfolk follow suit. Nothing happens.
Have you tried turning it off, then turning it back on?
Locke asks and laughs.
Be nice, Locke,
Dana says. She shakes her wrists, and the manacles and chains holding her to the wall rattle.
Could someone unlock these, please?
She asks.
They are chafing my skin. Malcolm?
Carly Beaumont asks.
This shouldn't be happening.
I know.
Kohls snaps. He produces the leather book out from under his robe and starts thumbing through it. Then he thumbs faster and faster until he grows frustrated and slams the book closed.
What's wrong?
Mrs. Holstetter asks.
It's blank.
Kohls says. The townsfolk gasp.
Well, if you aren't going to do it for me,
Dana says and yanks against the chains. The manacles snap free from her wrists and she pushes away from the tunnel wall.
then I guess a lady has to do it for herself.
The townsfolk gasp again.
Locke,
Dana says. Locke snaps free of his chains, as does Virgil. The two men rub their wrists, then nod and smile at Dana as they push past the townsfolk. The zombies move to stop them, but Dana snaps her fingers and the men collapse into heaps on the ground. Locke and Virgil walk out of the tunnel. No one tries to stop them. Everyone just stands there, stunned.
now, if that book of yours did still work, there'd be a passage in there explaining everything.
Dana says, as she approaches Kohl's with her hand held out.
May I?
I do not understand.
Kohl says. He clutches the book to his chest.
How are you doing this?
Well, unlike you all, I'll explain myself a little.
Dana says and points at Kohl's.
But I need the book first, please.
Do not give it to her.
Mrs. Holstetter says.
Oh, shut up, you old hag.
Dana says and snaps her fingers again. The book flies from Kohl's hands and into Dana's. The townsfolk erupt into gasps and whispers.
Shut it!
Dana barks as she begins to thumb through the book herself. The townsfolk go silent.
Ah, here we go.
Dana says and taps the page she finally lands on. She looks up at the Coven Dozen and the townsfolk of Kohlsville standing behind them.
Who here has heard of the trinium?
No one responds.
Not surprising.
Dana says and returns her attention to the book.
Otherwise, we wouldn't be where we are right now, would we?
Good to go, boss.
Locke shouts from the other side of the crowd. People move aside as Locke walks through the crowd, his camera on his shoulder recording the events. Dana gives her hair a quick flip and straightens her clothes. Then she smiles bright as Locke reaches her. He racks the focus on the lens and gives her a thumbs up.
Hello, everyone.
She says into the camera.
This is Dana Alighieri of WCKD, bringing you this once every 3,000 years event live. I hope all of you in the many levels below are watching closely, because this trinium could be the best ever.
She starts walking past the Coven Dozen as Locke reverses and backs his way through the townsfolk.
As always, the trinium is brought to you by his darkness, the lord of all evil and bringer of chaos,
Dana says.
So let's give thanks to our master, shall we?
Dana waits a beat before continuing.
Excellent.
She says into the camera.
We are coming to you live just after midnight here on Holomus from the oh-so-quaint town of Kohlsville, a town founded by a coven of witches several hundred years ago. Now, while this town has faithfully produced a sacrifice every year on Holomus, including the mayor's own wife from what I gather, his darkness has decided that their offerings have not been enough. What?
Mrs. Holstetter snaps.
What did she just say? Quiet, bitch!
Dana yells and the tunnel shakes slightly, sending dust showering down on the townsfolk.
Did you not hear that this is live?
Dana pauses her journey through the crowd. She turns slowly and points at Mrs. Holstetter.
I think you'll be the first to go,
Dana says.
Excuse me?
Mrs. Holstetter responds with a snarl.
Malcolm, do something!
But before Kohl's can react, or anyone can react for that matter, a tendril of pure blackness shoots out from the tunnel's darkness and wraps around Mrs. Holstetter's waist. Then she is gone, plucked into that darkness before she even has a chance to scream.
And the festivities have begun,
Dana announces. The townsfolk panic and try to run, but Dana snaps her fingers once more and everyone freezes in place.
Hold on there, people. Let's not ruin his darkness's celebration,
Dana says.
Now, who's next?
Another tendril shoots out and plucks Millie into the depths of the mine.
You bitch!
Millie screams.
I'll miss her,
Dana says.
She has sass.
Dana shrugs and looks directly into the camera.
Or did.
More black tendrils shoot out, and one by one the Coven Dozen are lost from sight until only Kohl's is left.
What are you?
Kohl's asks.
Just a working girl serving her master,
Dana says.
and keeping the denizens below entertained at the same time.
But we have been loyal.
Kohl's pleads.
Loyalty has nothing to do with this.
Dana says.
Of course you've been loyal. His darkness wouldn't choose disloyal subjects as the grand sacrifice for the trinium holomus, now would he? Where's the power in that?
But he must under.
Kohl starts, but his words are lost as he is snatched away also.
And we're moving outside now.
Dana says, and gestures for Locke to keep backing up. Once they reach the entrance to the mine, Dana snaps her fingers. Screams erupt from the mine, and the sound of footsteps echoes out towards Dana and Locke.
Oh, this is going to be wonderful, my friends.
Dana says into the camera.
Let me step aside so you can watch all the fun.
Dana does move aside, just as the first few townsfolk appear at the mine's entrance. But that's as far as they make it. Tendrils snatch and grab each of them. More townsfolk arrive, and more tendrils snatch and grab. Snatch and grab, snatch and grab. The process continues for several minutes until no more citizens of Kohlsville appear. Dana claps her hands and returns to face the camera.
What a spectacle.
Dana says.
It always feels like it's over too soon. Don't you agree, friends?
An unearthly howl erupts from the mine, and Dana's eyes go wide with joy.
But before we sign off, we have a special surprise for all of you.
She announces.
The one, the only, he who lives below.
The entrance to the mine grows unnaturally black. Not just dark, but a pure black that represents the complete and total absence of all light.
The Alligary,
A voice calls, rippling out from the mine like a wave of putrid gas and ick.
He who lives below.
Dana says.
I have to say, it is an honor to be in your presence.
the honor is mine, Alligary.
The voice responds.
I have waited since the dawn of time to be chosen for Hollowness. I think is darkness.
We all think is darkness.
Dana says.
Do you have any words of wisdom for our friends in hell, he who lives below?
Words of wisdom?
He who lives below asks.
I am sorry, Alligary, but I was not prepared for this occasion. I do hope his darkness and our friends in hell understand.
That's all right.
Dana says.
Just speak from the heart.
There is a pause, then Dana, Locke, and he who lives below burst into laughter.
It has been a long time, Alligary.
He who lives below says.
I have missed your wit.
And I have missed your unquenchable thirst for bloody sacrifices.
Dana says.
Now, just a couple of words will do.
Only a couple?
He who lives below asks.
Only a couple.
Dana says. A sound like mountains crashing into each other explodes from the mine, followed by a huge gust of wind, nearly knocking Dana and Locke off their feet.
Excuse me, I'm a little raspy.
He who lives below says.
A couple of words. Let me think for a moment.
I hate to remind you, but we are live.
Dana says.
Oh, yes, right.
He who lives below responds.
Then here are my words. Be cruel.
Be cruel.
Dana says in a satisfied, breathy voice.
Oh, he who lives below. You never fail to deliver. Be cruel indeed.
Thank you.
He who lives below says.
Okay, because I know our friends down there will be curious. What are you going to do now?
Dana asks.
You have devoured your worshippers. So what's next for he who lives below?
That is an excellent question, Alligary.
He who lives below says.
You know, I've lived out in the country for so long that I think maybe a change of scenery is in order.
Oh, really?
Dana replies.
Are you saying what I think you're saying?
I am.
He who lives below says.
I would like to rule the sewers of a major city. Does this land have a city that can accommodate me?
Does it ever?
Dana exclaims.
Several, in fact. Are you thinking of staying up north here?
I don't know.
He who lives below answers.
I have grown tired of the winters, but then the despair it brings each season is so delicious.
Well, before you go all snowbird on us and move to Florida,
Dana says.
I may have a suggestion for you.
What is the suggestion?
He who lives below asks.
We'd all like to know the answer to that, right, friends?
Dana says into the camera with a laugh.
But seriously, while this city is still northern, I think you'll enjoy it immensely.
Please do tell.
He who lives below says.
New York City,
Dana announces.
the city that never sleeps.
Never?
He who lives below asks.
Never.
Dana insists.
How delicious. I shall take your recommendation and move to the sewers of this New York City.
And there you have it, friends.
Dana says into the camera.
Another lovely conclusion to another trilinium holomus. I want to thank he who lives below. I want to thank my crew. And I, of course, want to thank all of you for watching.
Dana raises her hands high into the air.
By the blessing of his darkness, let us all be cruel.
Dana cries. She holds her hand up for a few seconds until Locke says.
And we're out.
Excellent.
Dana says. and lowers her arms. She turns to the mine.
Thanks, he who lives below. You did wonderful.
I'm just happy to have been chosen. Do you mind if I contact you later so we can talk more about this New York City?
No need, no need.
Dana says.
His darkness already has his things in motion. You can probably move there in a week or so.
Wonderful.
He who lives below says. The pure blackness recedes.
See you in another 3,000 years?
He asks as he drifts back down into the mine.
I hope so.
Dana calls after him. Her phone chimes with an incoming text.
Looks like no rest for the weary,
Dana says.
His darkness himself is sending us to Utah.
What's in Utah?
Locke asks.
An incest and cannibal cult is prepping for immolation.
Dana says.
He wants before and after footage.
Nothing live?
Locke asks.
Nope.
Dana says. She looks around.
Where's Virgil? We need to hit the road.
Probably asleep in the van.
Locke says.
I'll go wake his ass.
And tell him to plug in the correct route this time.
Dana yells after him.
We can't be a day late, or we'll miss all the freaks setting themselves on fire.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoy these stories, be sure to subscribe to the podcast and check out some more of my episodes here.